and welcome to the debate. I'm Farooq Petafi. Once again, let me remind you that if you are noticing any change, it is because the regular host of this program, Sana Maqbool, is traveling. For this week, I will be guest hosting the program. So today we are going to talk about more or less the same things that we did yesterday. Pakistan's political situation, how PTI is actually faring against the courts, how PTI is also faring against the ruling coalition, because it seems that no matter what they do, they keep on, because they have a lot of media muscle and they have a lot of influence. It is whatever mistake they make is always presented as a victory. But despite that, the reality on ground is quite different. For example, they had to actually resign from the National Assembly at a time when they could have actually ensured that they had the opposition leader. And after twice accepting that resignation, they then try to go back to the assembly. Similarly, at this moment, the uncertainty about the provincial elections that is there is also because of the fact that they sacrificed two things. One, they sacrificed their governors, who voluntarily actually stepped aside, even in Sindh also. And then the second thing astounding is that they actually sent assemblies that were in their pocket, Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa packing. And because of that, they have lost a lot of leverage. Once you have sent a government that is capable of delivering a lot home, then circumstances go out of your hand. So in the end, what exactly is their strategy at this moment? It seems that they are saying that they are going to go for voluntary arrest so that they choke the jail system of the country. But amazingly, that is it not what they accuse the government of trying to do? You become a food and deliver yourself to the tiger, and then you say we are protesting. So we are going to talk about that as well. And speaking of self detonation, we have seen another very interesting thing that happened, and that is Chaudhry Parvez Elahi, the former chief minister, also let us call PMLQ a tribe. So tribal elder, one of the tribal elders of PMLQ has joined another tribe, that is PTI. So that is also quite interesting because the PMLQ leadership has denotified him and said that the party does not cease to exist just because of his decision. And finally, PTI seems to have thrown away its last leverage that it had, and that is the presidency. President was acting quite neutrally as his office actually demands, and then of course he took some very aggressive steps that we had discussed yesterday. We are going to discuss it again. In the end, we are going to discuss all these matters and more in order to help us understand these issues. In the studio, I'm joined by Umer Ijaz Gilani, a legal expert, although he looks very young, but is a seasoned lawyer. Thank you very much, Gilani sir, for being part of the program. We are also joined online by Muhammad Adil Chattha sir, who is Advocate High Court, Adjunct Faculty of LUMS. Thank you very much, Chattha sir, for being part of the program as well. Gilani sir, let me ask you about the way everybody keeps on saying that Imran Khan sahab is getting special concessions or treatments from courts. The way timeline or deadlines were extended for him yesterday. Have you seen any similar kind of episode in your own life for a commoner like you or me?
Patafi sahab, firstly, thank you so much. I'm honored to be on the show with somebody as seasoned as you are. I have not, in the last 7 to 8 years of my practice, ever seen somebody who is pleading, who is begging the court for a pre-arrest bail or a protective bail get the sort of treatment that the former PM Imran Khan has been getting in the last few days. So for instance, the anti-terrorism court in Islamabad did not dismiss his pre-arrest bail without giving him 9 opportunities on which he did not appear. Of course, whenever somebody doesn't want to appear, somebody wants to get what we call a tarikh from the court, he has to make up some excuse. So on every occasion, the former PM made some excuse. He said he's not well, he said he is traveling, and so on and so forth.
Right.
But normally what we have seen is that at least at the bail stage, the court is not lenient. The court is extremely strict. Because it's not
sorry to cut you, but plot further thickens when the gentleman in question is can also be accused of perjury, and those charges have not been brought up, right?
Absolutely. I was witness to a similar situation back in the year 2019 when the former finance minister Miftah Ismail was trying to get bail from the Islamabad High Court. And simply because the affidavit in his case had not been properly attested, the court actually returned the bail application and asked him to file afresh. So normally what we see at the bail stage is that that the accused doesn't get any leniency. But you know, if the anti-terrorism court hadn't done enough, at least they eventually dismissed the pre-arrest bail.
Right.
But what we saw yesterday is something that is even more astounding, which is that the court kept on adjourning the protective bail application. The Lahore High Court, the Honorable Lahore High Court, kept adjourning the hearings for after every couple of hours, and it seemed as if eventually the courts, their lordships might even step out of the court and
actually there was a call made to that effect.
I mean,
I'm not going to leave my car.
With all due deference, as somebody who's part of the judicial institution of the state, I felt a little saddened by the sort of stuff that was happening, because the majesty of the law, at the end of the day, who benefits from maintaining the majesty of the law?
Right.
It's the judges, the lawyers, and also the common citizens. If you don't if you don't maintain the aura, the majesty of the courts, then nobody is better off. So I really don't see why that was being done.
Right.
Why were they doing that?
Absolutely. And Gilani sahab, that further is complicated by the fact that the former Prime Minister was actually, he had with him supporters who were there, and it seemed an attempt to swarm the Honorable Court as well. But allow me to actually bring in Chattha sahab as well. Chattha sahab, you have listened to the discussion so far. Do you want to comment on why there would be some kind of exceptionalism when it comes to Imran Khan sahab's cases?
Thank you very much, Pitafi Sahab. Pitafi Sahab, I think that the exceptionalism given to the Imran Khan by the Honorable Lahore High Court and the courts before that is not only extended to him, but was also extended to many other people from other political parties of the senior ranks in other political parties. I personally know of many cases in which someone was outside the country and their protective bail was accepted by various courts in the country only on the ground that they are going to come to the country and they're going to surrender before the court. They were not before the court at that time. We recently know a few cases from the other political parties as well. Moreover, I also know of cases where people were unable to come to the court. Similarly placed people because of some health issues, and their similar bails were therefore granted while they were in the court premises but not in the courtroom, because they couldn't go upstairs, perhaps due to some health issue or otherwise. So, but this is the one extent which explains the matter before the Lahore High Court and matter regarding the protective bail. But otherwise, the number of cases that are registered against Mr. Imran Khan and the type of relief that he is getting from the courts and not being arrested despite having several warrants against him, that is some sort of an exceptional leverage given to him, and that is unheard of in the legal system here.
Right. And regarding another very important thing, sir, regarding the fact that the former Prime Minister was accused also of submitting the wrong, signatures. That must be, perjured signatures. So we haven't heard about framing of any separate charges regarding that. Does that also happen often?
No, absolutely not. And generally speaking, such issues are rarely pointed out before the High Court. These issues are obviously contested very much in the trial courts, but in the High Court, such issues are not pointed a lot. But I think if this issue was pointed before the High Court, it was should have been a serious issue for the High Court. But Lahore High Court has, as we know, shown some leniency on that, and now we also know that a similar issue has also come up before Islamabad High Court. So we have to see what the Islamabad High Court does with this case, and does it set a precedent where everyone can come up with fake signatures and perjury and do perjury in similar cases, or will it set some strict standards for such cases?
All right. Let me come back to the studio, Gilani Saab. Since we are talking about various cases and how legal fraternity is involved, today something very interesting happened. I'm sure that you are also represented by one of the bar councils, but bar councils of Pakistan actually decided that they are going to charge, given that there was an audio leak, alleged audio leak, and they decided that they are going to individually, file a reference in Supreme Judicial Council. And the concern that I've got, it seems that in the past also, because we have actually created these institutions of accountability which are very high, it seems that occasionally there is no automatic trigger mechanism to start an inquiry if something actually sets in or something actually spreads immediately the way we saw. Do you think that there is need to keep on fixing these problems as well? Because yesterday when we were discussing this issue, one question was where if a chief election commissioner actually exceeds his mandate, or for that matter, governor does or president does, where do we go for accountability? And the answer was that only one man, that is chief election commissioner, out of three, can be taken to the Supreme Judicial Council. Again, that is an exception, not a matter of a routine. What happens then?
So I feel that the audio leaks that have recently happened have raised some very serious questions about the integrity of one of the honorable members of our Supreme Court. Now, whether those allegations are true or not, those allegations have to be investigated, because who will, it is the judicial institution, the courts, that are supposed to ensure the integrity of our entire system of governance. But if the integrity of our judiciary itself is being questioned, and with good reason, with some evidence, then there has to be done, something has to be done. So I feel quite proud of the legal community that they have at least stepped forward and made the courageous and bold decision to hold the superior judiciary accountable. It is not about a witch hunt or about any vendettas, but it is about going after every allegation. It is not, I'm not saying that the honorable judge is guilty, but there is an aspersion that has been cast, and the Supreme Court itself, in the judgment reported in 2012 by the Arsalan Iftikhar case, has held that any aspersion about the integrity of a Supreme Court judge is a question of public importance with reference to the enforcement of fundamental rights. Because if the Supreme Court, if there's even an aspersion that the Supreme Court judges are not fair, or that they are prone to being influenced, then the fundamental rights of every citizen in this country are in danger, because it is these judges who are supposed to be the guardians, the custodians of our rights. So I feel that it is a positive step.
Right.
And
what you're saying is, especially you have given us a precedent also. If that is so, what does it make, this entire case? Does it make it a matter of public interest and therefore ground for suo motu? Or for that matter, a reference or some kind of mulling over in the Supreme Judicial Council?
Absolutely. I feel that if you look at what has happened in the last few days and judge it by the precedent set by the Supreme Court in 2012, then definitely a suo motu is warranted. But if a suo motu,
but such a suo motu, will it not make the Supreme Judicial Council redundant in a way? Because this is Is it not why the body actually
So,
exists?
so really, the if the Supreme Judicial Council doesn't step forward,
Yeah.
the Supreme Judicial Council also has suo motu jurisdiction, and I think there is a serious conversation going on between the legal circles in this country, including within the judiciary, that the Supreme Judicial Council should step forward and clear this, the truth should come out, whatever it is. If the allegations being leveled against the honorable judge are incorrect, then they should be completely dismantled. But if there is some truth in them, then of course there has to be, something has to be done.
Right. And Chattha Sahab, one would have actually expected that regardless of what kind of reaction we get, we will at least see some kind of talk coming from the bench regarding investigation of who was actually casting all these aspersions, or whether there should be an inquiry into privacy of various senior house senior officials. But we haven't seen anything of that sort at all so far. Why would that be?
You asked excellent question, Pitafi sir. That's one of the reasons I would believe is that judiciary, when it comes to such questions, takes its time and deliberates on them for at least few days before making up its mind on what way it is going to take these matters forward. And secondly, I think because this is a matter which would also involve a lot of other questions, like for example, can recorded tapes like this can courts look into that? Uh, what can be the value of forensic evidence gathered on those tapes, forensic reports on those tapes? What can be the legal value of such tapes which are taped without the permission of the person who were talking? And or at the other time, this is so important for the country because all of us repose trust in the judiciary, and the Supreme Court is the place from where all stream of justice eventually flows, from where which is the highest end of all stream of justice. So it is very important that this matter should be taken up by the superior judiciary, but it should also be cautious that it should not be taken up that causes any harm to the reputation of judiciary as an institute. And the honorable judge, whose name is in these audios, should also be seen by the judiciary that what was the nature of the conduct that was being taken by that judge.
Right, right. And regarding this issue as well, because we have seen many leaks in the past, recent past as well, and then there was a claim about data being stolen from authorities. So that would have constituted a legitimate reason or grounds for ordering another JIT or investigation. Is it not true?
Absolutely true, and I think in this case it also demands such a GIT, such a an action by the superior judiciary, whether it be in the Supreme Court or in the Supreme Judicial Council. And I think the matter should be thoroughly investigated, and after investigation, if the allegations are true, strict action must be taken, and if the allegations are not true, the persons involved should also be given a clean check.
Right, absolutely. And that is very important. Let me come back to Gilani Sahab. Gilani Sahab, because we are talking about Pakistan's politics as a broader context, and it seems that Imran Khan Sahab, when he went for this transition bail or transitory bail, actual plan we are told is that Imran Khan Sahab is going to come to Islamabad, appear here, and then go to Peshawar. From there, he is going to kick off his jail bharo tahreek. Now, amazingly, it seems that the entire system somehow is facilitating that. Why would that be?
I think I take a cue from what you're saying, that there is the wisdom of this strategy where a popular leader is trying to egg on his supporters into the jail is quite questionable.
Okay.
But since my forte is not political strategy, I want to speak about the legal aspect of it, which is that there is absolutely, to my knowledge, no law in the country which actually allows somebody to go and surrender himself to the police authorities and say that,
Arrest me.
arrest me and protect me and keep me in the jail for as long as you feel like.
Yeah.
This is some sort of a mythical notion that seems to have gained a lot of currency and captured the imagination of political workers. I'm afraid even if you want to, there is no process that would allow the jail authorities to fulfill your wishes.
Yeah.
But
So you'll have to break some law immediately to get arrested.
I think you'll have to possibly, you know, ask the prison department. The prison department might end up asking you for expenses for bread and breakfast there. But
Is that,
I think this.
is that an option?
I think if you offer sufficient amounts of rewards and incentives to the prison department, they might keep you for a night. But that depends on your behavior about how long you will last there.
Okay.
But I want to, harken back to the history of this idea. Somehow we have sort of cheapened many ideas which actually are historically significant. This idea of, filling up the jails, jail bharo tehreek, emanates from the colonial era,
Yeah.
where the colonial governments would make laws that were absurd and tyrannical, such as, for instance, imposing a tax on anybody who is collecting salt.
Yeah.
And such tyrannical and absurd laws would then be defied by the people in a large number,
Yeah.
leading to their arrest.
Yeah.
So the arrests did not happen because out of just sheer love of the people for the prisons. The arrests happened because the people were left with no option but to either live a conscientious life or end up in jail, and they chose out of their moral courage
Right.
to submit to jail rather than to the will and whims of colonial authorities.
Right.
That is, to my mind, a beautiful, courageous, and sacred history of our forefathers from the colonial era in their anti-colonial struggle.
Yeah,
it's sad that this idiom has been cheapened and made into a
with
political
due
joke.
respect, with due respect, that ship actually sailed back in 2014 when the former ruling party, that is PTI, actually announced that it is going to go for civil disobedience movement, right? That was also another of the uses or methods to actually boycott the British Raj and their colonial rule. But somehow we ended up actually burning bills and posting, various visuals on Twitter elsewhere, where people are refusing to pay their GST. So that seems to be the similar kind of script. But the problem is that in their mind, I'm sure that they think that these are great ideas. But when it comes to execution in the end, they end up compromising their leverage even further. Let me now go back to Chattha Sahab. Chattha Sahab, since at the start I also mentioned the president's decision that he is going to call for elections on April 9th unilaterally. What do you make of that, and do you think that we are right in the middle of a constitutional crisis?
Thank you, Pitafi Saab. Pitafi Saab, I think these are the questions in which we will need help of the courts, guidance from the courts. When the constitution is written, many constitutional experts sit together. They try to envisage every possible situation and they try to write it down. But life, Pitafi Saab, is way more vast than that. And it hits us from where we do not expect. And I think it is such a situation here as well, because the Constitution in Article 105 talks about the scenario where the governor dissolves the provincial assembly, and then the responsibility of announcing the date of the elections is also on the governor. But here is a case where the governor of Punjab has not dissolved the provincial assembly, and no one is taking responsibility for announcing the date of the elections. And the Lahore High Court in its judgment said that the Election Commission should do it. But then again, there are consultations ongoing between the Election Commission and the Governor Punjab. So I think it is in this constitutional vacuum that Mr. President Alvi came ahead and tried to knock it for a 6. But let's see what happens in the court. Yes, it is a constitutional crisis. And yes, there is no settled law on this. And this will actually end up in courts.
Right, forgive me for saying this, but earlier when you said refer to a judgment actually coming from Lahore High Court, at that time also regarding election dates, many pundits actually accused or actually claimed that the honorable courts were trying to legislate through their judgments. And it seems that quite unfair that all political matters have to end up with courts. These are high stake gambits, and because of that, everyone who is not happy with the decision ends up, bad mouthing or defaming the honorable courts. Is it fair on courts to actually take cognizance of these matters when the lawmakers actually fail to do their job?
Because many a time there are vacuums in the legal documents, and these legal documents start down from the contracts up to the laws and up to the constitution itself. In last 2 years, we have seen how many times there were constitutional vacuums in the constitution itself, which ended up in courts, and courts had to then devise a way for the country to move forward. We remember that last year when Mr. Hamza Shehbaz was the CM and the Mr. Umar Sarfraz Chima was the then governor, was not taking the oath from the CM. And then the Lahore High Court ordered the Speaker National Assembly to take the oath. And then the Speaker came and took the oath from Mr. Hamza Shehbaz in Lahore. And a few months after that, when Mr. Pervez Ilahi became the Chief Minister, then the governor at that time was not taking oath from Mr. Pervez Ilahi. And then the Lahore High Court had to step in again and ask the president to take oath from Pervez Ilahi. So when there are constitutional vacuums or vacuums in legal documents, I think courts do interpret them according to the overall sense of the documents rather than letting country just go in a way where it doesn't make sense for anyone.
Right. But regarding the office of president, repeatedly we have seen that he was also given a law, and I understand that office of president actually enjoys some measure of immunity as well. But repeatedly he was given, whenever a reference actually sent by him was thrown out, there was a gentle, tap on the wrist, and then he was let go. Do you think that if he has exceeded his mandate in this case, the courts can actually penalize the office of president or himself, or the person of president?
I think perhaps for courts to penalize the president would be too much because we already have a constitutional procedure. If the president is to be penalized, and that is through the constitutional procedure of impeachment. But I think there are legal questions on the powers of the president under the Elections Act through which he has exercised his power. Pitafi Sahib, if going into the history of the constitutional law, the first case on the constitutional law that we all read with much love and affection is Marbury versus Madison from United States, 1803. And that is a case where an act gave a power to a constitutional body, which the constitutional body otherwise didn't have. And similar is the case in Pakistan. The president in the constitution we see is a ceremonial body, but then the Elections Act 2017 gives some powers to the president. So we have to see that if the overall scheme of the constitution doesn't give any power to one constitutional person, can an act give that power to that specific person?
Right, and that is the question at this moment. Gilani Sahab, again, since we are talking about president's measures, now it is clear that there are three people involved: one governor, the second chief election commissioner, the third president of Pakistan, and one of them at least must have, at the very least, if not all of them, have exceeded their mandate in trying to push for this kind of a change or this kind of a decision. But the ultimate victim in itself is the electoral process. Now, regarding electoral process, I understand that, as Chattha Sahab was saying, that the honorable courts might be able to offer some kind of relief. But in the end, when it comes to accountability of these three gentlemen, how do you proceed with that accountability, especially when National Assembly's sizable number has resigned and has not been replaced, and you need 2/3 overall majority to impeach president. Governors are replaced by on the advice of the Prime Minister by the President, and the Supreme Judicial Council is supposed to hear the case of Chief Election Commissioner, which usually doesn't happen.
So I want to dwell first upon the merits of what the President has done, which is that he has unilaterally announced elections in the province of Punjab in a situation where he has not received any such advice from the caretaker government of Punjab or from the Election Commission of Pakistan.
Okay.
And when you look at it, this may be novel and ingenuous, but it is quite clearly unconstitutional.
Okay.
And I would have, I would have passed over it and considered it something of an innocuous deed were I not aware of the history of this country. So our learned friend Mr. Chattha mentioned Marbury versus Madison, but the first most famous and fatal case in our constitutional history is Tamizuddin, where the predecessor of the president, the Governor General, exceeded his mandate and tried to exercise, to rely upon some dubious interpretation of constitutional theory to actually dethrone the entire constituent assembly of this country. So I find it an extremely dangerous precedent if the president whose office is effectively not representative of the people because he is not directly elected, nor is he independent entirely, unlike the Chief Justice or the Election Commission. He is not entirely independent because he is normally somebody who is a political worker. If that office starts usurping powers which are reserved for independent institutions such as the Election Commission or the caretaker cabinet, that is a dangerous precedent, a slippery slope, because in this so one of the core achievements of the 1973 Constitution in this country was that we were able to reduce the powers of the office of president and shift them to other institutions, particularly the elected representatives of the people. Now, if the president has to do anything, so the Constitution in this case, we cannot allow the president to just rely upon one legal provision, Section 57 of the Elections Act. The law has to be interpreted holistically, and in that regard, the most important provision is the Article 48 of the Constitution, which says that whatever the president does, he can only do so if he receives advice from the federal cabinet. So in this case, there are two issues. One, he didn't get any advice to do so from the federal cabinet. Secondly, he didn't get any serious consultation from the ECP. And thirdly, even if that power has to be exercised,
sorry to cut you, but when they say that they wrote a letter and they got a letter in reply, that does not amount to any kind of consultation?
I think in this, if one could say that in this case, the consultation of the Election Commission could be considered binding.
Okay.
Because if you look at the Election Commission's decision on this issue is, in my humble view, binding on the president.
Okay.
Because that is the correct interpretation, because the Constitution reserves the function of elections for the ECP. Article 217 to 218 make it very clear. So if we look at the Constitution holistically, it's not the president's job to decide when and how the elections will be conducted, and least of all in a province. So if at all there is somebody who could have done something like this, it would be the governor of that province. The federal government, the president can arguably exercise this power for the general elections in the federal level. But how can he unilaterally exercise this power at the provincial level? So this decision, is a violation of not only the principle of separation of powers, but also a violation of federalism. Because the federal president is actually dictating the province of Punjab. If at all, he's sort of not only usurped the jurisdiction of the ECP, he's also usurped the jurisdiction of the governors of Punjab.
And I'm hearing you're using very heavy words, right? But where's the relief? Where is the recourse?
I mean, I have absolutely
Where is
nothing.
accountability?
I use these words cautiously because I have absolutely nothing against the honorable president or
Of course,
the
of course.
party that he represents.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is,
but I
I'm
see
not
a dangerous precedent here.
no, but I'm not complaining about the language. I'm just pointing out that it might emanate from the severity of the problem, right? As you pointed out. But the problem is that then when you go for a legal recourse or constitutional recourse, there's none.
I'm afraid the only recourse we have is to seek an interpretation, a proper interpretation of the laws from the courts. But I think what we are presently doing, discourse and political accountability is also definitely an important form of accountability.
Right.
And I do not feel that we can take it lightly. It is not just about, we cannot perhaps compel the president to reverse his decision, but we can egg on and we can encourage the rightful and thoughtful people of this society to think about how dangerous this line of reasoning is.
Right, but very quickly, do you think that it has damaged the impartial image of the president himself?
But absolutely, I think if the office of the president is, if the president has whatever the president does, he must do so in a way that is impartial.
Right.
And clearly, there is an attempt here to do otherwise. I do want to clarify that, while I'm against the president usurping the jurisdiction of other constitutional institutions, of course, we all agree that the Constitution mandates elections being conducted within 90 days.
But there's there's no recourse there. There's no punishment if you don't.
But the Constitution, I feel that if the Constitution says something, we have to do it that way.
Yeah, my concern is that the way the Constitution has been amended over the years, it has become a patchwork quilt. And because of that, there are many holes which have not been addressed.
I think there may be holes, but on this point, every constitutional thinker in this country is unanimous that 90 days means 90 days.
Yeah,
whether
and
you
that
like
is great.
it or not.
But with due respect, all those constitutional experts put together cannot be a replacement of clear language in the Constitution itself, right? You have to address this issue. You have to admit. Let me go back to Chattha Saab. Chattha Saab, I understand that in countries all over the world where lawmaking takes place, where constitutions are written, there are certain things which are left unsaid because everybody believes that there is going to be certain conventions which will be conventions of decency perhaps that will be followed. But we have seen strangest kind of examples in the last 1 year. Vote of no confidence is taking place in the National Assembly, and all of a sudden a deputy speaker decides to actually throw it out and then ask the Prime Minister to dissolve the Assembly. The Prime Minister does it, the President does it, and in the end the court reverses it. Similarly, in Punjab also, when there is vote of no confidence, hoodlums are allowed to actually enter the building and they create a lot of ruckus. There is a lot of violence. Then the court actually has to press the then speaker to hold the election. And after that also we have seen what exactly happens. A vote of no confidence takes place, a person is replaced and governor refuses to take oath. And in the end, now this matter that seems to be a dead end somehow, that you have to once again go to the courts. Is it not true that, like Trumpism, nobody expected such a political force to enter the system where it will regard little for the word of law or conventions that were there? Chattha Saab.
Thank you, Pitavi. Pitavi Saab, earlier you used an excellent term for what is happening in the country, a patchwork quilt that has become of the Constitution. As you rightly pointed out, I think it is very clear now, we can all of us can see that no one, and I repeat, no political party at the moment wants to work according to the Constitution. All we want is that Constitution should work according to us. And we don't only rely on our interpretation of the Constitution, we actually pick and choose the constitution, articles of the constitution in a way to make it work our way. And I think this is one of the problems at this moment, that we have disregarded any respect that we had used to see in the political system for the constitution. And as the constitution used to be a basic point for every political party to move on and move further, we have at the moment we're not only just interpreting the constitution as far as the political parties are concerned, we're trying to rewrite it from our own perspective, and we're trying to pick and choose what we want and how we can actually find some uh, basis for that in the constitution.
Right. And do you see any immediate way to actually resolve all these issues, barring going to the courts?
I think elections can be one way. If one political party gets a good majority, that can be one good issue, a fresh start for this uh, political tussle between different parties. So if one political party gets a good majority, then I think perhaps the other political parties might not want to get into this sort of constitutional uh,
No,
maneuvering and
but that is a
taking.
admirable sentiment. We can ask for a two-third majority or clear majority, but it is not within our hands. The electorate is going to decide. What happens if there is a hung, assembly again? Is it not true that there is a federal assembly at this moment, and it can actually try to fix some of these laws, these problems?
Yes, truly, truly, absolutely, Qaddafi Sahib. And I think we have seen in the past few months many efforts by various players who are trying to resolve things between different political parties. And we've also seen that ice also melted at some point in time. We've seen some senior political leaders from the two different political parties trying to bring people together and trying to resolve things. And we've also seen that Mr. President was also trying to play a role before he became completely partial lately. And we have also seen that few journalists also tried to uh, work their way into this. But I think, as far as the time is concerned, we are far from any solution.
All right. I'm told that we are running out of time. So, Umer Ijaz Gilani sir, very quickly, how close is the system to the breaking point? Very quickly.
Uh, I'm not so sure how close we are, but I really want to urge all the political thinkers and power brokers in this country who have an interest in the future of this country to sit together and forge a common future for our people. Because in a year that the country was devastated by floods, earthquakes, and economic disasters,
And
we have
terrorism
done
also.
absolutely nothing, and terrorism, an emerging threat of terrorism, we have done absolutely nothing other than political wrangling. This cannot go on. We will not allow you to continue like this. The political parties, the civil and military establishments, the judicial establishments, the media barons, they all need to really sit together and forge a common future for our country.
I noticed that, with every other department, you kept on using word establishment, but when it came to media, you did not use that word. You ended up talking about barons. Why wouldn't you call it establishment? Because they have one also.
Well, I'm partly
They are called
because
PBA.
I have to show some deference to my hosts.
No, we don't fall under them. Yeah, but anyways, I'm told that we have to conclude the program here. Umer Ijaz Gilani sir, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. You came to the studio and educated us on law. Mohammed Adil Chattha sir, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program via Skype. Your input was critical in understanding what is happening in the country. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. The biggest problem at this moment is what I have mentioned or alluded to earlier. One party does not see any kind of reason to play by bylaws, and because that is happening, all parties are also mimicking the same system or same attitude. The biggest problem right now is in politics. You can have strategies that will last longer, and then there is brute force. Usually that brute force is applied by hardliners or for that matter fanatics. The biggest problem is that you can get away with the use of brute force But in the end, the fanatics usually don't win wars. All they can win is battles. And because we are actually fighting within this constitution ambit, it seems that we will end up compromising the entire system. And before that happens, the political party that I mentioned particularly needs to take a step back and realize that this system can crash and then nobody will have any way to revive it. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.